What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting the Fins here on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast, also on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm your co-host, Hussam Patel. Today we'll be recapping the Dolphins 2025 NFL Draft and all 9 picks. Before we get to the show, quick shout out to our sponsor, Thompson Cigar. This show is brought to you by ThompsonCigar.com. Use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. Once again, use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more at ThompsonCigar.com. Coach, how we doing today?
Hey, so I'm doing well. Kind of relieved. Was getting tired of the draft stuff, and now, finally able to move on to film reviews for players that the Dolphins have actually drafted, and looking forward to talking about some of those guys with our guest today.
We do, and special guest Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On NFL Scouting, is here with us today. Kyle, how are we doing today?
How we doing, guys? Good to catch up with you both and kind of detox this draft class, like Eric said, and enough of the speculative. What if they do this? And it's more okay. They've done this. Now, what do we make of it?
Exactly. There was a lot of talk of the Dolphins going cornerback in the first round, actually, and albeit they did not really do that. There was a lot of talk of, how are they going to fill Calais Campbell's spots? Who's going to be, the backup to Zach Sealer? And we finally found our answer with a couple of defensive linemen that the Dolphins have drafted. Coach, we were thinking it could be Jahdae Barron, could be Will Johnson. I was very high and huge on Walter Nolan, but instead they went with Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, I felt that, the direction to go with Kenneth Grant had more to do with the type of player that they were looking for as far as the interior defensive line, more so than the, players 1 versus 1. When you look at a Kenneth Grant versus a, Walter Nolan, like you said, Kenneth Grant does a lot of different things than what Walter Nolan does, right? Kenneth Grant is not just a nose tackle only player, right? But he can do more of that than a player like Walter Nolan does. And interested to hear Kyle's thoughts on that pick over, I think we were all pretty high on going with a guy like Jahdae Barron there. What are your thoughts on Kenneth Grant at 13?
Yeah, I think the thing that this selection, and really when you look at the entire body of work of the draft class, what it tells me is the concentrated effort on getting more physical, more stout, more potent on the line of scrimmage. And if you told me coming into the draft, you're picking at 13, these are the 12 players off the board, our number one objective is to get more stout, is to get more physical in the trenches. And that was my best player available through that scope and that lens. And I think Kenneth is kind of getting unfairly typecast as a certain kind of player based off the weight and the stature. But this is a guy who has played 734 snaps in the B gap as either a 4-eye or a 3 technique versus 300 snaps career in the A gap. So it's 73% of his snaps he's playing somewhere in the B gap. And I think for Kenneth, the athletic profile that he has, and you're seeing that with some of these clips that we have here, is a really rare blend. And I think the ceiling that he's going to be able to afford is what makes it a pick that I'm really excited about. Never mind the fact that I think the floor is really going to raise what that primary objective was, which was get meaner and more physical and stout in the middle of the defense.
Yeah, I really like this game by Kenneth Grant because he absolutely destroyed USC along those gaps. And we need a type of guy that can muddy the look for quarterbacks, specifically in the passing game. And also, as we see teams shift back from wide zone or zone runs to more so trap concepts, counter concepts, and even gap schemes as well, that's someone you need to plug up those holes. Coach and I were having this conversation early on one of our podcasts. Like, it would be better for the Dolphins defense if they were in 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s instead of 3rd and 5s and 3rd and 2s, specifically if they're able to stop the runs and stop the bleeding on those early downs, because you're able to get a litany of pass rushers that the Dolphins have in Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, Zach Sealer as well, who not a lot of people know that he's actually a pass rushing type of defensive tackle, and Bradley Chubb, who should be healthy for the start of the season.
Yeah, and I think the thing when you look at what the Dolphins did last year with their run defense, when either Calais Campbell or Zach Sealer was on the field, the product was really good. But when both of those guys were off the field, it was catastrophically bad with the yards per carry and what it looked like. And you kind of get through some of the abnormalities of the first half of the season, and you get your starting quarterback back, and Zach Sealer has some freak injury in practice with an orbital bone, and he missed, 2 games? Arizona and Buffalo. And there were some big moments on the ground in both of those games that served as backbreakers that really kind of helped you lose those 2 football games in big moments. So having a guy who, I think Kenneth, he can play 3, he can play 4-eye, he can play a tilted 1 on passing downs. Depending on if you're going to mug up gaps, you can put them right over top of the center and going to collapse them back. There's a lot of versatility that you can give with Kenneth Grant because of the stature. And I hate the fact that it seems like we've just kind of put him into this box of, oh, they took a nose tackle and a run stuffer at 13, because that's not really what he is.
Yeah. Still on the topic of defensive line, go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask because, I think that when I looked at the draft, when I was looking at defensive tackles and the way that I ranked them, right, I kind of went with the assumption that, we were going to a 3-4 defense. We've heard a few defenders talk about that in their interviews, our free agents that we brought in, that it's a 3-4 defense. So I was kind of under the impression that Benito Jones was going to be the nose, Sealer was going to be one of those 5 techs, and we'd be looking for more of another 5 tech in the early down packages. Do you see Kenneth Grant being able to play in those 5 technique alignments?
I think he can. I think that's the thing with Kenneth, where you see penetration ability, but you also see, and he has that requisite length. And I think you contrast that to Jordan Phillips, who I think is more of an authentic nose than Kenneth is. And it's because of like the squatty build and how hard it is to kind of get underneath of his pads. He's got some quickness to his game, but Kenneth, I see enough gap control ability and lock peak shed and the ability to kind of stack blocks and diagnose blocks where it's all going to come together. But I think that's the bet that the Dolphins are placing. Is one of the best assistant coaches that they have on the staff is the defensive line coach, and the body of work that he's had with just about anybody that's come through, and they've had career years while working here in Miami. So I think that the tool set that Kenneth has, if you told me you're going to go 3-4 and he's not going to be on the nose, he's going to be the other base end or the other 3-4 end opposite Sealer. If you told me that he's going to reduce down, if you told me you're going to go even front, he's going to go in a tilted 1. If he's going to be the 3 technique, like I think he has the physical ability to do all of that. And that's why I think he was the pick here.
Now, question for both of y'all. If Calais Campbell was still a Miami Dolphin, would the Kenneth Grant pick still make sense?
Coach?
Yeah, I think it would. Like Kyle was talking about there, the alignment versatility there, right? Even if you brought back Calais Campbell, you were still going to have a significant void in snaps. So I think that if you had Sealer and Campbell as your 2 more 5 technique or guys that could bump out towards the ends, then it would make a ton of sense to bring in a guy like Kenneth Grant that could, you could instantly put in as your nose. He can be your 1 technique, right? He can play that 3 technique as well. So I think that if Calais had returned, that Kenneth Grant would make even more sense than what he did with the way it was currently.
Yeah, and the name that I would point to here is Emmanuel Agba and his departure, where I think Calais maybe takes a larger share of some of that type of role, and it still frees up the interior rotation reps between the departure of Deshaun Hand, I think maybe it makes the Jordan Phillips selection a little bit redundant if you knew you had Calais in your back pocket. But for all the things that Kenneth can do, and obviously the long-term play that you have here, I see no issue finding overlap opportunities to keep those guys on the field at the same time.
Yep. Still on the topic of defensive line, Jordan Phillips was the second defensive lineman selected for the Miami Dolphins. And I think I sense the current trend and the current theme of this Dolphins draft class. It was not necessarily about production or draft capital value. It was more so the value of players that they were drafting for the locker room, for character, for high FBI. And I think that was what this pick, Jordan Phillips, was. When we talked to him in the media presser, he was saying that, he was there for his teammates, and he spoke very highly of also new Miami Dolphin safety, Dante Trader Jr. He might have not been the most productive guy at Maryland, but when you needed that lunch pill type of guy, and I believe he's going to be taking some snaps with Kenneth Grant, these guys are going to be monsters in the next 2 to 3 years, and I think key leaders in the locker room soon.
Yeah, I think that they are a really nice combination. We want to look at ways to reduce the number of snaps that Zach Sealer has to be on the field, that we don't have to ask him to play, close to 1,000 snaps. A great way to do that is to have Kenneth Grant as your 3 technique in those even fronts, and to bring in a guy like Jordan Phillips on your 0 or 1 technique. I don't think the production thing is such a big issue, right? You're spot on with the off-field stuff, and how great of a teammate he is, how hard of a worker he is. Very young guy with a lot of room to develop. And a lot of people will, look at the box score and say that this guy hasn't had a sack in his entire career at Maryland, but all you got to do is turn on the tape, and almost every game you'll see a couple of reps where like he does everything but sack the quarterback. Like he's taking the center and putting him in the quarterback's lap, right? And the quarterback is able to scramble away. So I would, put money on Phillips surpassing his college career sack total in year 1.
He's a total dog as far as like the intensity in which he plays with the point of attack stuff. As you could see in some of these clips, he can be pretty slippery too. And he can have some gap penetration ability. Now, the success rate as a pass rusher, I think, is always going to be hit or miss. He's going to be very technique reliant with his success because he doesn't have great length. He's somebody from an arm length perspective. It's 31.5 inches, but you saw a player not that long ago who was a mid-round draft choice in Milton Williams, who came into the league and had success, and I think has some similar twitch. I think Milton's was a much more refined pass rusher coming into the league, and he obviously found the role that he had and cashed that in for a big contract this offseason. It was a huge piece of that rotation for Philadelphia, and that's the kind of ceiling I see with Jordan Phillips. But in the meantime, like the leveraging ability to take double teams on the inside, I mean, if they're going to try to run downhill and get underneath of his pads at 6'1.5", I mean, it's very difficult to do that. And I had a chance to see him up close in person at the Shrine, and he built like a refrigerator. I mean, it's very clean weight too. I mean, for being the weight that he is, he carries it extremely well. He's a ball of muscle, former competitive power lifter and wrestler. Like that all shows up when you see his build and his frame and his body composition. And I think that showcases with what his preparation and stuff looks like. And Hussam, you mentioned the media availability that he had and just how impressive that was to kind of hear him talk about his process and how mature he is. As he was one of 10 guys in this draft class that was 20 on draft day. So he's young too. So I think he's more of a true nose than what Kenneth Grant is. I could see him seeding reps to come off the field on obvious passing situations, but it's all about getting into those long and late downs and getting your best rush package on the field and being a little bit more protected from some of those neutral third down rates.
Yeah. Next up was Zeke Biggers out of Georgia Tech. He was a fun guy to interview with. He's from the South, country guy, loves fishing. He will fit right in to Miami. The only concern I had with Zeke was about his pass rushing ability. Because in this league, especially as a defensive lineman, to make your mark, to get on the field, you have to be able to rush the passer. Now, I did not see enough instances where he was able to pressure the quarterback or turn it into sacks or affect the play. He's more so of a developmental guy. Coach and Kyle, what do you see his projection? And do you see him potentially making the roster as a 7th-round guy?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, right, I think it was Willie Gay Jr. that did the interview from like the back porch out in the country. And I would love to sit on the back porch with Benito Jones, Willie Gay Jr., and Zeke Biggers and just have a beer. That would be awesome. But, in terms of what he could contribute, and this is a question I kind of had for Kyle because I haven't got to do a deep dive into Zeke Biggers. But, we've looked at Kenneth Grant. We've talked about Jordan Phillips in terms of being able to, play those more interior techniques. Zeke Biggers has that massive wingspan. Do you see Zeke Biggers, not as a defensive end, not kicking out to the 7 and 9 techniques, but is he a player that could play on rundowns as a 5 technique defensive tackle?
I think that's what you're hoping he becomes. And I mean, this past year at Georgia Tech, he played less than 50 snaps in the A gaps, right? And it's almost like the length is much more better served playing inside shade on offensive tackles or head up on offensive tackles at times. It's leverage for him. For me, he's a taller guy, and the hinges at times can be really inconsistent. But he's got an 85-inch wingspan, massive wingspan. He's got 4 career blocked kicks. So if he's going to make this roster as a rookie, he's 6'6" with an 85-inch wingspan and a 34.5-inch vertical at 320 pounds. Like, that's freaky ups. So that's where that athletic profile shows up, is you put him over top of one of the guards on the field goal team, and he's going to get up. And if he's going to make the roster, I think that has to be where it happens for him. And they have to see that inherent value, because if they don't, I just think the down-to-down stuff right now on the defensive side of the ball is probably a little too far off, barring some kind of significant leap that he makes in training camp.
Yep. In Austin Clark, we will trust. He looks like he'll be a mold of clay that Austin Clark will try to develop. He did mention that he uses those arms to at least try and bat down passes or muddy the vision for opposing quarterbacks, especially in the ACC. I saw one rep where he was just jumping up and down when the quarterback was looking his way, just trying to make sure he doesn't even see the wide receiver. And they come another defensive lineman comes back around, puts the pressure on him, and the quarterback trips, and it's essentially a sack. I mean, those are the types of plays for Zeke Biggers, Kenneth Grant, Jordan Phillips, where even though they're not producing on the quarterback, they're able to affect the play or allowing other pass rushers to eat. Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips pretty much said the same iteration. If we all eat, I also eat as well. And I think that is a nice change to this upcoming Dolphins locker room. Coach, I think your favorite pick was offensive lineman Jonas Avanaya. You mocked him a lot in your mock drafts. You told me and Eric as well that you could see him as a potential Pro Bowl guard. However, and Kyle, I want to ask you this question. When watching Arizona, specifically his right tackle tape, it feels as if Arizona's scheme did not benefit his skill set.
I felt like you saw more of the zone type concepts that you'll see in the 23 tape than in the 24 tape. And that's kind of where I saw the most 1-for-1. Now, what you did see, and what I'm really interested in for the Dolphins this year, is you think about James Daniels, and he's 325 pounds, and Larry Borum is an out on the offensive line, and he's 330. And now you got Jonah, and he's 324 pounds at the combine and probably plays heavier than that and certainly has the power at the point of attack to be better than that. And then you draft Ollie Gordon in the 6th round, and I'm wondering what kind of run scheme diversification could we see? In which case, some more of these reps are a little bit more of a translation for what Jonah was asked to do this past year at Arizona. But I love the profile inside at an offensive guard, but you see with some of these reps and the ability to get out in space, these perimeter screens. I mean, that was a big staple of the offense last year. I hope it's a less big staple this year, but when the time comes to call those numbers, this is a guy that's got the range to do it, and obviously has exposure on both sides of the center and all the explosiveness that you could possibly need to be able to win in the first 2 or 3 steps, which is the big point of emphasis for offensive linemen in this run scheme, with as we've come to know it the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, talking about the possible transformation in terms of the run schemes that this offense uses. And, we've all three of us have, talked about trying to get Devon Achane involved more in the passing game, less of a traditional running back. So the pick of Savanaya, bringing in a bigger guard in James Daniels, the pick of Ollie Gordon, who I did a deep dive on earlier today. And even if you go back to Jalen Wright when he was at Tennessee, like that's where he really made his money at Tennessee, was the inside zone stuff. So, when you just look at what's been happening over the last 2 years, there's definitely a lot of crumbs that are leading to more inside zone stuff this year from the Dolphins.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about a change of runs, a change of scheme, I think the Ollie Gordon pick makes 100% sense to me now, because I thought it was more so, okay, he can pass block really well. If you need him to spell Jalen Wright or Devon Achane, he can. But I don't think this is going to be a 3 running back rotation anymore just based off this pick. I think it's running back 1, Jalen Wright, running back 2, Ollie Gordon, and then offensive weapon X, Devon Achane, just based on what we've seen on Achane's pass production in 2024 to what we're seeing some videos out of OTAs and minicamp. I think they're going to be using Ollie Gordon a lot. It's not to say that he's developmentally already there, specifically on some of those runs. He could be better in some cuts and stuff, but I really want to see, Kyle, can Ollie actually produce the same way he did in 2023?
I think the thing with me for Ollie is he's a high cut guy with some longer strides. The step frequency is not at a super high rate, and that means his track adjustments take a little bit longer. And because of that, I think his production, and this was kind of reflected in the grade that I had on Ollie, and I liked Ollie. I had like a universal grade for him as a late 4th round grade. I thought for the Dolphins scheme specifically, he was a little bit less attractive. But again, that's without considering a potential scheme change and kind of diversification for more inside zone and downhill runs and gap schemes. And I think he's a little bit more of a, what can you get predetermined for him up front? When he hits his explosive plays, it's because the guys in front of him hit the blocks the way they're supposed to, and he's able to explode through the second level of the defense, maybe with a stutter step or a hezzy, and then he's able to kind of open up his strides and get into open grass. So I would say the translation of his 23 explosiveness as a runner is going to come in large part due to hopefully some more consistency with the execution up front, particularly with the stuff that hits downhill. Because if you get that, and I think if you get some more counter and some more power schemes for Ollie, I think that's where he can really shine. But that really wasn't where their bread was buttered. So it's going to be a fascinating kind of chemistry experiment for me to see how it all adds up.
Yeah, and that's the step rate thing that you said there. I see it, right, and that makes a lot of sense to put it in that type of verbiage. When I was doing my film review earlier today on Ollie Gordon, and I looked at both the 23 and 24 tape for him, and I honestly didn't see a whole lot of difference in Ollie himself. I thought that I was pleasantly surprised with how well Ollie actually reads the zone runs. He's typically making the right reads, but you can see at times that if he's a little late reading something, that he doesn't necessarily have that one cut change direction type stuff. Right? It's either it's a very slow delayed move, or there's 1 to 2 extra steps with it, which can result in him not being able to find that hole late. But if you can get him into a system that gives him a pretty good picture up front, and hopefully with the improvements that we've had on the offensive line, that's exactly what we're going to have in Miami. I can certainly see a scenario where as the season goes on that Ollie picks up a bigger role. I would like to see him be a little more physical. I mean, he's a bigger back, I think 220 plus. And there he shows flashes of it. Sometimes he will, lower the shoulder and drive the legs, and other times it's a little more upright through the hole. Hopefully, not being a feature back, right, and really having to capitalize on the opportunities that he gets. Hopefully that will, increase the rate that he uses that type of strength when he runs.
Yeah, we'll round out the offense with the pick of Quinn Ewers. There was a lot of back and forth between Dolphins fans whether they should take Shedeur or Quinn. Early on in the year as quarterback one, we saw the slide for Shedeur. We saw the slide for Quinn Ewers as well. A lot of the stuff that's coming out about Quinn Ewers is that Miami can do a lot for him and fits his schematic profile. But what can Quinn do for Miami? Can he elevate this offense to a similar level that Tua can with 1 to 2 years under his belt already under the Sarkisian system?
Yeah, so I think that when you look at a pick like that, obviously 7th round pick, even if he comes in and he is a development backup that becomes a QB2 in 2 to 3 years, that's a steal of a pick as a 7th round pick. But in terms of, what he does for the offense versus what the offense does for him, I think that if you go back and look at, a Brock Purdy, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that Quinn Ewers is going to turn into a Brock Purdy, but you didn't bring Purdy into San Francisco and say that, he was going to be the one to improve that offense, right? It was getting into that scheme. He earned the reps by being familiar with it, right? Making the right reads, not playing hero ball, right? And then as he earned the confidence in the coaching staff, then he earned that freedom to be able to expand a little bit off there. So again, when you're looking at somebody like Ewers, you're looking at somebody that's coming in familiar with the system. He's not going to be pressed into playing this year with Zach Wilson being quarterback too. So I'm not sitting here worried about, if something happens to Tua, that we're going to be looking at, a rookie Quinn Ewers out there. We're going to get an entire preseason to evaluate him. And, if we go through preseason and he's a complete disaster in the NFL, then he's a 7th round pick and you cut ties with him, right? But if you go through preseason and he's showing potential that he could develop into a QB2 or more, then you use a 3rd spot on your 53 and you keep him around and move on from Zach Wilson next year.
I think the best selling point I can have for this pick, and I'm not crazy about Quinn, but as said, it is a quarterback 3 with a 7th round pick. So the dice roll here, I think the juice might be worth the squeeze if it obviously hits. The big question that I think a lot of Dolphins fans had was, do you want to draft a quarterback knowing that player's not really going to get a lot of developmental reps? And I think where you can bridge the gap a little bit with that and Quinn is the parallels that exist between the Sarkisian system and the McDaniel Dolphins offense, and how there's direct correlative 1-for-1 reps that exist at the college level doing a lot of the same conceptual things. Now, he's got a lot of stuff to clean up. I think the post-snap decision-making and seeing the full picture, and some of the mechanic stuff with what his arm he thinks he can get away with versus what he does get away with is 2 totally different things at times. And That's tight ropes he's going to have to learn how to walk. But at the end of the day, this being a draft selection that I think is coming into this offense and conceptually how it's designed and how you run it, he's a little bit further ahead than what your standard 7th round pick quarterback would be. And I think that's the answer to the question of how do you justify taking a day 3 quarterback to be the QB3 when he's not going to get reps?
Yeah, he did say that he is excited to work alongside Tua and really be his understudy, because at Texas, it was mainly 1 to 2 reads of those concepts. But in the NFL, it's 3 to 4 reads, and it may be split coverages, 2 to 3 different coverages happening as well, and different types of formations that he has to learn, that he has to see, that he has to understand how defenses see it pre-snap, how to see it post-snap as well. All right. On defensive backs, Jason Marshall Jr. and Dante Trader Jr. I had a scout text me about Jason Marshall Jr., and I don't know how Kyle and Coach, you guys could sell me on this pick, but he told me that he is quote-unquote bad. I understand the pick from a press man side of things, but can he be CB2, CB3 in this Dolphin system?
You want to go with that one first, Kyle?
I would temper expectations. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the insider reporting has the Dolphins tied to a number of veteran corners. I think it's a dice roll on day 3 on a guy that's got a lot of physical tools, brings the ability to play some man coverage, which obviously has a value, but the consistency with the ball production is not great. I think we're too soft at the top of route breaks, the anticipation for routes, the spacing and zone coverage. Some of the transitional stuff I think can be cleaned up with some better footwork. And then there's the run support and the tackling elements of that position that every offensive coordinator is going to go into every game plan install at the beginning of every week, and they are going to say, we're going to make the corners tackle. And I think that's a question that exists. So I think there's enough athletic upside here, and obviously it's a cost-controlled player where I could certainly see the pathway for him making the 53-man roster. But as far as being a starter, I'd be stunned. I think you'd have to get a totally different product in training camp in the preseason than what he put on tape at Florida.
I agree with that. The tackling stuff is a major concern for me in terms of being a starter. I think the athletic ability is there, and similar to Cam Smith, you see the flashes of it. And, I could see a scenario where he might be an option in a, maybe a dime type defense where, the run rate is a little lower. One of the big downsides for Marshall for me is that because of that, lack of aggression in the running game, I think there's also a very limited menu for him on the special team side of things, right? And when you start talking about cornerback 4 or 5 on the roster, right, those tend to be guys that are on your kickoff coverage units. They're on your punt coverage units. They got to be able to tackle in open field and be willing to sacrifice their body. And I'm just not sure that is, what Jason Marshall is, right? So unless he comes in and just, blows the doors off in OTAs and minicamp and is just, becomes the ball hawk that he wasn't in 2024, I think he's going to struggle to make the roster as a, lower cornerback on the depth chart, mainly due to that lack of special teams contributions.
Yeah. For Dante Trader Jr., he mentioned that defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver went to quote unquote bat for him at the draft, in the draft room, in this process and the selection of this pick. Coach, you alluded to saying that he could be Kyle Hamilton light. Kyle, what did you see out of Trader Jr. in your scouting report and analysis? And do you think the Dolphins could be shifting to a 3 safety type of defense?
I hope they do, just because of the versatility that I think that brings, especially when you consider Ifitu Melifonwu and all of the ways that he can line up. I think Trader can get there. The questions that I had with Trader kind of stem from coverage anticipation, cutting routes, angles, transitions, range on the back end. But as a guy who's capable of playing in the nickel or rotating down from split coverages, or playing on the second level as kind of a nickel or dime linebacker type player. I see good run support. I see good fit ability. I see good physicality. I see excellent strain and pursuit to the football. He's a core 4 special teams type guy. I think this is a very easy player to project to the 53-man roster. It's kind of the question of between him and Patrick McMorris, who was a 6th-round pick last year. Does one of those guys kind of take the jump and command that spot, especially with some of the concerns and questions that you have at the cornerback position? And if the answer is yes, there's opportunities and snaps to be had there. It's really just a question of how much of a leap does he find in finding the football in coverage. I think that's the question for him that I'm going to be most eager to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, and I think that his path to the 53 is going to be special teams. I mean, complete opposite of what I talked about with Marshall, right? Like you said, Kyle, core 4 special teams guy, right? He's done it in college. Like he had over 500 special team snaps. We're not even, projecting a starter and saying that he can play special teams. This is a dude that went out there and did it every week, wanted to do it every week. I do have a lot of the same concerns in terms of his ability to play on the defense. One of the things I think could help him is that, this is another guy that was a captain on his team. When you watch him on film, you can see him, right? He's out there pointing, communicating, moving guys around. So, for me, this is the type of guy that, if you have to ask him to, cover a tight end one, you're probably going to be in trouble, right? But if this is your 10th or 11th guy in the defense and you can cover up some of those vulnerabilities with other players, and you get a guy in there that can, help you get aligned properly in pre-snap, there's definitely value there as long as you can find ways to cover up the athletic limitations.
Kyle, thank you so much for joining us here on Scouting the Fins. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins. You can find him at Kyle Krabs on Twitter. Before Kyle goes, we will be heading to break, and we will get Eric Whitticky on for the second part of the show. Kyle, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Do you ever watch sports and find yourself wishing there was a way to get into the game? With Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house. The game is in your hands. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. They've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. Create entries with all basketball or baseball picks. You can mix and match sports, and you can choose whether a player will go higher or lower on strikeouts, points scored, home runs, and rebounds. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into $1,000 just with your sports knowledge. Millions of fans have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Their app has over 100K 5-star reviews and millions of players. Download the Underdog app now and sign up using the promo code 3YARDS to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code 3YARDS. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon first deposit.
Be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369.
All right, and we are back. Eric, welcome back, sir. How are we doing today?
I'm doing well. Definitely looking forward to sharing some thoughts on what was a really, really good first half of the episode with Kyle. Just once again, I didn't really get my opportunity to thank him, but I want to thank Kyle for coming on and spending that time with us, breaking down the draft picks.
Yeah, and Eric is a top-notch producer for us. So, Eric, thank you so much for producing the show. He's been hosting the show a lot too earlier on, if you have listened to our podcast early on. So he's got a lot of versatility for us. And even with his football knowledge, he beats me to the game a lot. Eric, I know you watched a lot of Florida. I wanted to get your thoughts on Jason Marshall Jr. Do you agree with Kyle and Coach's sentiments?
I mean, yeah. I pretty much sat up here, day 3 of the draft and said that I foresee. I think he might have been the second best corner that the Dolphins got, next to BJ Adams, and I still think that that's probably the case. I think he's more of an athlete than a corner. And for a guy that's got 5 years of college football under his belt, that's not a great sign. I think that you see the outline and the bones of what you would want in a press man corner. But there's just something missing with him. And if he was a guy that you were drafting that was super raw and you were taking him and he was 20 years old, I could kind of see the vision there. But for a guy
Like
that's
a Noah Igbenogany type of player?
I mean, listen, if you want to throw that out there, yeah. I mean,
he's been an okay, decent-ish nickel corner for the Commanders.
no, absolutely. He got it. He got an extension and he earned it in Washington.
And he's got a playoff win.
But
maybe Chris Greer actually did hit the pick right.
Maybe. Yeah, but like I said, Marshall, with as much college experience as he has, for him to not be more polished is, I think, a red flag. But they took the player in the 5th round clearly because they saw something there. And you just have to hope that they'll be able to get more out of him than the Gators were.
But Coach, what do you think it was that the Dolphins saw of Marshall Jr. at the Dolphins local pro day? Because that's when he mentioned that's when it really turned around and changed for him and the Dolphins evaluation.
I mean, it had to be the movement skills. I mean, you don't get a whole lot of different things there than what you see on TV at the combine, right? They're going to run through the same type of drills in terms of your 40, your short shuttle, your 3-cone drill. Probably going to do some ball skill type drills, and maybe they just felt that the ball production that he had at Florida did not represent the ball skills that he was showing at the pro day, right? So comes down to a projection, right? We're talking about a 5th round player. This is a day 3 type guy. And when you talk about these day 3 guys, and others have mentioned this, right? This was somebody's guy, right? This isn't going to be a guy that the entire room was a consensus on, that they wanted him there. This was, last year there was the McMorris pick, which was said to be the scouts guy as a whole. That's the pick that they wanted to use, right? You heard Trader saying that Weaver was the one that pounded the table for him, right? A lot of these type of picks come down to one guy pounding the table, making a case for him, right? And these are just kind of shots in the dark that hopefully somebody gets this right and they can put the feather in their cap saying that this was my guy back in 2025. But there's less than a 50% hit rate on these type of guys, so never know what you're getting.
Eric, if you were in the Dolphins draft room, who would be one of the players you'd pound the table for 100% conviction?
Like this past season in the draft?
In this draft class, it doesn't have to be a Dolphins player.
Ooh,
I got him thinking with this exercise, and I'm gonna have a pretty good exercise for us in a little bit too. This is gonna be a fun second half of the show.
I mean, so considering where they ended up picking and where I would have liked to see them go, You know what? I'll make it a 1-for-1 with the Jason Marshall pick, and I'll say that I would have probably been there banging on the table for Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. Because that's the kind of press man cover corner that I think has the production, has the skills on tape. Maybe not the same caliber of athlete as Jason Marshall, but I think he more than makes up for that in that dog mentality that you want on the outside, and would fit the mold of, you know, maybe not from a physical standpoint, but just, you know, bringing that toughness that this defense or that this team in general really wants to embrace in 2025. And like I said, I think he would be a guy that you would go into. We'd be talking about him potentially being a starter on the outside, and we might not hate it. So Kobe Bryant would have been probably the guy that I would have been pounding the table for on the draft here in 2025. It's just going back through the way things played out.
I think the only knock on Kobe Bryant was his weight and potential injury concerns, specifically in the NFL. The Dolphins did not select guys that were injury debilitated, that did not have to go through extensive rehab, and that are not quote unquote injury prone. Now, you obviously can't project injuries, but it's something to take note of as of recent, and it kind of piqued my interest. Coach, who would have been the player you would have banged the table for 100% conviction, and you would have told Chris Greer, this is the guy, put the card in right now?
So, I mean, I'm going to cheat here a little bit and use, you know, the hindsight 2020 vision here, right? And let's say that we went into the draft, right, and we said that Kenneth Grant was our target in round one, and that we had to come out of this draft with a starting guard, right? I've said this before, that when you watch the way that the draft fell, right, that Jonas Avenaya was the last starting guard for me, the last guy that was left on the board that I would say, you know, you plug him in and he's the starter right away. I didn't feel the same way about a Tate Ratledge, and while I really liked a Miles Frazier, did not feel that he was, you know, near that same level. Liked Ariante Ursary, but felt that he was more of a tackle specific prospect. So like I said, if we went into the draft, we got Kenneth Grant, and we said that, you know, as we were approaching pick 48, our goal was to get a starting guard, right? Then I would have also been banging the table, seeing those guards go off, seeing Booker go at number 12, seeing Zabel go in the first round, seeing Jackson go in the first round, right? I would have been banging the table saying, look, you know, if we're not going to get Savonai at 48, we got to go up and get him. And obviously that's what Miami did. I know that some people have questioned, you know, the cost as part of that trade, but that is something that I'm 100% on board with.
That's interesting. Interesting. All right, one more final exercise, and I want player comps from you guys on this. Coach, who's your player comp for Kenneth Grant?
I mean, it's hard to argue with probably one of the most common ones that I've seen, and that's going to be Dexter Lawrence, right? Very, very similar player in terms of a 320-pound plus guy that, you know, when you know, if he just walks off the bus and you look at him, right, you think that is a 0 or 1 technique defensive tackle, nose tackle type player, right? But when you see them move on the field, you know, not just in the movement skills, because they've got elite movement skills, but also the effort, the range that they have, right? The ability to pursue a play outside the box. Like this is not a guy that you look at and you say that, you know, outside zone, he's going to be a threat as that ball is getting stretched to the outside. So I think that very, very similar player to Dexter Lawrence for me.
Eric?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with one of the pre-draft comps for him, and I can definitely see the Dexter Lawrence comp there. But, you know, I also see a guy like BJ Raji in Green Bay, who, while he was a fantastic run stopper, had really underrated pass rushing chops, and I think that that's something that we will be able to say about Kenneth Grant. Maybe we're not able to say it right now, but I think down the line you see the skills right now and how transferable it is. And then you see kind of the ensemble that he's going to be playing with. And this is a player that down the line, I think 2-3 years from now, it's entirely possible that we're looking at Kenneth Grant as a guy that, from that, because of the fact that he is typecast as kind of that nose, shocks a lot of people in that he gets, maybe 5 to 6 sacks a year.
All right, Coach Jonas Savaiinaea.
Yeah, so for that one, I would say a slightly more athletic version of Aaron Banks out of San Francisco, right? Same scheme, similar type builds. You saw Banks cash in free agency this year at, what was it, 18 million or whatever. But a player that you would not typically view as being a outside zone type player. Again, if you took all of these linemen from the draft and you put them in a lineup, criminal justice style, right? Jonah's not going to be the one that you pick out and you say that's my outside zone guard, right? But when you look at him on tape and his ability to, quickly close that space in short yardage, I think there's a lot of similarities there, and the ability of him to, hold up versus power, looking at that nice wide base, his ability in pass protection. I think that current example that a lot of similarities in terms of the players and the roles that they'll be asked to fill. I think that Aaron Banks is a good comparison for Jonah.
I see it more so of like a much faster Mike Ayupati, who used to be on the 49ers, and they're a type of Polynesian offensive lineman. Savaiinaea did mention that he used to watch him a lot when he was watching his lower body and his feet. Eric, what was your comp for him?
Yes, I'm actually going to go with the guy that I think we kind of kicked around the idea of the Dolphins signing because of the kind of strength that he could generate for you in the run game. Although I think he's a better athlete and probably a better overall pass protector, or at least projects to be, than Will Hernandez as a guy on the inside who could give you that power, give you a little bit of that scheme versatility to run a little bit more of that gap scheme. Like I said, I think he's probably going to be a player that's over time a better pass protector than Will Hernandez likely is from the interior, and he's a guy that certainly has much better length than Hernandez from an upside perspective. But when you just look at what the two players would have brought the Dolphins offense in effect, I think that's where the similarity comes in on my end.
All right, gentlemen, this was a great episode. And as always, guys, make sure you keep listening to us here on the 3 Yards Per Carry feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Stick with us. We will have more post-draft coverage with some special guests, as well as we get into rookie minicamp, training camp, and OTAs throughout the summer. We may potentially see some third wave of free agency signings that we can also break down. As always, y'all, go Fins, baby.